Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to Views on News. I'm your host Shehzad Qayyum. Folks, we're going to be talking about midterm United States elections today, and also we'll talk about the interview of Imran Khan with the Financial Times. Now, when we talk about the United States election, these are actually the midterm elections, which are the general elections of the United States, which usually they take place around the mid of the presidential term of the United States, which is 4 years. So we're looking at about after 2 years, usually these elections, they actually take place. Now, it includes 435 seats in the United States House of Representatives and about 33 to 34 in the out of the 100 seats in the US Senate as well. Out of approximately 34 out of 50 states also elect their governors in the midterm elections, except for a couple of states like Nevada and New Hampshire. And also, when we look at the midterm elections, historically, generally, their turnover is a bit lower than the presidential elections. And of course, in 2022, these elections are a bit unique, because if you look at the history of the midterm elections, then usually the president in power does not get too many seats. But here, the competition this time between Republicans and Democrats are pretty much neck and neck. And of course, the Democrats now lead with 50 seats, and the Republicans are sitting at 49 seats. Now, to talk more about it, we've been joined by our honorable guest in studio, Dr. Naazir Mahmood, senior journalist. Thanks a lot for being with us this evening, sir. And also, we are joined virtually Bariza Umar, a political analyst from Washington, United States. Thanks a lot, Bariza, for being with us this evening. And now, as we know, the midterm elections are underway in the United States. Now, there is a question that has been raised in many minds, that why the red wave did not show the majority in the midterm elections this time.
So there are a couple of factors. A few of them, there was a prediction that the abortion issue had peaked over the summer after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. But it seems that was still top of mind for a lot of people. So that's one huge factor, while the economy was also a really large factor, which the Republicans were hoping would go in their way. The backing of former President Trump in a lot of the primary elections that had a lot of election deniers coming to the competition, which were not really, for the most part, very good candidates on the whole. They were just following the President Trump's line. That did not serve them as well, because a lot of people did not find them to be either as qualified. They found the idea of election denial not as appealing, and indicating more of an extreme. And it seems that kind of extreme politics isn't really playing well. Then, even though the approval ratings for President Biden right now are not great, especially because of the economy, this was more of a referendum on the people who were put forward by Republicans. I think there's also more of an understanding this time around with midterm elections of what is at stake, given what happened with the Supreme Court nominations, because President Obama did not have control of the Senate. He was not allowed to appoint Merrick Garland when he had almost a full year in his term. And President Trump, with control of the Senate, was able to really win over control of the Supreme Court, which came to the fore with Roe v. Wade this summer, and now with affirmative action cases that are currently in the court. So I think people have come to realize what is really at stake. Then the other, so that's why the red wave did not happen. And one of the big seats was Pennsylvania, where Mehmet Oz was really an odd candidate to be backed, because he doesn't even live in the state. He lives in New Jersey. There was a lot of very strange messaging around his campaign. But that was one of the swing states that would have been a real win. And Arizona and Nevada were real surprises as well. As for Ohio, we're still waiting on that, but luckily for the Democrats, nothing is really hinging on that anymore after Arizona and Nevada, and they will probably win Ohio, especially if President Trump decides to announce his candidacy and kind of take the wind out of that runoff coming in December.
Right, Bariza, also you just mentioned about the some of the factors of obviously these components or the combination of few things which resulted in the rise of Republican taking the seats. Now, when we look at the Democrats. 2 years so far, there was obviously inflation was a huge challenge. In addition to that, the unemployment rate and abortion, as you just mentioned. But when you look at it, it's pretty much like neck and neck at the moment. I mean, there is something unique in this particular elections, midterm elections, compared to the previous ones, because usually, as I shared earlier in the beginning of this program, that usually the president in power, they don't take as many seats, but here we are at 49 versus 50. Would you be kind enough to shed some light?
I think it's been almost over 20 years the last time that the midterms have not actually shown a result that has favored the opposition party as opposed to the party in power. And I think that is very much an indictment of Trumpism, if one would call it that. The extremes that were being run by the right, by the Republican Party, did not generally do well. And in a few cases, for example, Ron DeSantis, he did extremely well, but he ran pretty much independently on his own, as opposed to when he first ran and he had President Trump's endorsement a few years ago. This time, it seems that President Trump is finding him to be a bit of a competition. He has, at least people have been talking about him putting in a presidential bid the next time around. So it seems that the ones who actually did well were not the ones who were backed by President Trump for the most part.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Naazir, when we talk about the U.S. midterm elections, of course, somebody is going to win in these elections. At the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. Do you think that will affect the foreign policy of the United States, the midterm elections result?
Well, normally in foreign policy, whether Republican Party is in power or Democrats are in power, it doesn't make much of a difference. Those slight differences are there, but normally they don't take. For example, Israel has been their ally all along. So whether Republicans are there or Democrats are there, all of them support Israel. Their policy towards Arab countries more or less remains the same. When Trump was there, he had slightly better relationship, and after Joe Biden came to power, slightly strained relationships were there. But overall, countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, all of these remain, long time friends of US. So I don't see any major foreign policy change there. Also towards Pakistan, again, in the previous government, when Prime Minister Imran Khan was in power, he tried to project that as if he had very good relationship with Trump, but he could not achieve much.
Right.
So this was most empty talk rather than anything concrete. So I don't see any major change in foreign policy. These elections will impact more their internal policy than foreign policy, I think.
Absolutely. Now, Bariza, when we look at some of the Republicans, they are not willing to accept the results where they have lost the elections. Just like we have witnessed in the presidential elections, there were a big fuss in Washington by itself. What do you think? Do you think something like this will occur again, like the chaos which was actually took place in Washington last time in the presidential elections when Republicans refused to accept the results?
I really don't think there's going to be a repeat of January 6th, especially given the recent indictments and convictions of the basically small fry involved in the January 6th Capitol riots. But I also think that election denial has really, they've shot themselves in the foot, because if you are competing in an election where you are also asking people to only believe the results if they go in your favor, why would anyone trust that process? And why would you be getting your supporters to come out and vote in a process that you are constantly calling into question? So I really don't think that is going to hold much water. I do want to say that the Republicans have managed to do fairly well in the House, not as well as they were expected to, given that it is a midterm election and they are in the opposition. But redistricting has played a huge role in flipping a lot of the congressional seats that will bring them into the majority. 5 of the flips that they did in the Congress were because of redistricting that changed the probability of Republicans winning those seats over the Democrats. So, and they were able to do that in states where they controlled the state Supreme Courts also. And so the rules on redistricting were very different from what Democrats would have been able to do in similarly large blue states versus large red states.
Now, Bariza, as we know that the Georgia's result is yet to come. Obviously, it's going to take a few days for it to arrive, and for the whole process will be completed in this regard. Now, and in addition to that, Vice President Kamala Harris's her vote will be casted, and it will be a tie-breaking vote, even though Republicans will win this election. Let's say if they win this election, then she still has. Could you please shed some light and tell our viewers that how does this thing work when the Vice President Kamala Harris will cast her vote, and what will happen afterwards?
So it's most likely that Georgia will go to the Democrats because in runoffs generally in Georgia, whoever is maintaining a slight majority in the initial election retains that majority in the runoff election. In Georgia, it was a very interesting case of a lot of people who voted Republican for governor actually left the field for senator blank. So either those people will sit out the runoff and not go vote and actually give the Democrats a larger majority, or it's possible that they will vote for the Democrat option. So it is most likely that Georgia will go to them. If, however, Georgia doesn't, in any case where you need a simple majority to pass anything in the House or in the Senate, and if there's a 50-50 split, Vice President Harris will be casting the tie-breaking vote, and she will, of course, most likely vote with her party. And as will the 2 independents who are in the Senate. They are counted with the Democrats, even though they are independent. So they are counted as most likely casting their vote on the Democratic side.
Right. Well, folks, we're going to take a short break right here. Stay with us and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back, folks. We were talking about the U.S. midterm elections. Doc Saab, if, let's say, the Democrats will lose the midterm elections, let's say, obviously it will be a bit harder for President Joe Biden to pass, the law in this scenario. How do you see that?
Well, losing election, of course, in House of Representatives, I don't think there is a chance that Democrats can win a majority. So in House of Representatives, they will be in minority. Good news is that at least in Senate they can get their way, and this is a positive news. And as we previously also discussed, this is I think one of normally there is an anti-incumbency trend even in Senate also, but this time that anti-incumbency trend did not happen. That means against the ruling party or against the president party. So in terms of legislation, I think if history is any guide, we remember that previously when Barack Obama was president, he tried to pass a couple of laws, very good laws, but at that time the majority leader blocked those legislations. So they did not allow Barack Obama to pass those laws which he wanted desperately to pass. So this kind of situation can happen again. And House of Representatives with Republican majority will definitely try to create problems for Biden administration. But at least 2 or 3 things they have already done. And I think the reason why they performed better than expected, because some people were expecting that, as you mentioned, red wave, because Biden administration did at least 3 things. They performed well in environmental issues. They performed well in health, they performed well in other social work programs. So these were their, I think, flagship projects that they presented, and they were successful in that. So I think that played an important role. Despite having high inflation, people voted for them, and they did not lose Senate. So this is a positive point. Right. But such situation where president's party faces difficulties is not new. This has happened in the past also. They find a way out. So he will face problems, but overall I think this situation where president faces problem is not unprecedented.
Dr. Saab, we were just talking about the foreign policy of the United States in case Democrats, if let's say if they lose the House. When we talk about relations with Pakistan, Democrats versus Republicans, would you be kind enough to shed some light with their relations with Pakistan individually?
Well, if you compare Republicans and Democrats, again I would repeat that overall it remains the same. But
it's about the interest of the country.
But the changes, in the especially with relationship to Pakistan, I think lately, before this present government came to power in Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif and PDM led government, during the previous 4 years, relations went down, they declined, and there was a sharp decline. And that was again, due to the policies of the previous government, PTI government. And this was not only with America alone. We had a strained relation with China, with Arab countries. So somehow they could not manage. But luckily, in the past 6 months, we have seen right now in Pakistan we have a better team. So they have, I think, better relations with Biden administration, much better than Imran Khan's government had. Right. So I think I am positive that with the Biden government remaining 2 years, I think the present government and especially Pakistan's foreign policy led by a very competent team of Bilawal Bhutto Zardari and Hina Rabbani Khar, I think they have achieved a lot in 6 months' time. So they have tried to mend the damage that was done previously. Right. So I am positive, and I think that in the coming 2 years, Pakistan's and America's relations will be better.
Absolutely. Now, Ms. Bariza, when we look at the map, for the reds and blues, based on the historic maps, when we look at it, obviously, usually, when it comes to the red and blue, then usually the south is more red compared to blue, if I'm not wrong. This time, like I said earlier, things are a bit different and unique. Do you think that some of the states have changed their colors substantially?
I think that a lot more states were trending purple in the last election than they had been previously. The population demographics are changing. People's affiliations are changing. We have a younger population in a lot of these places. And even though the young voter turnout was only about 27%, which isn't huge, we had a lot of members of this Gen Z actually getting involved in politics and running for office. And we have a 25-year-old, the youngest member of the House of Congress elected this year as a Democrat in Florida. So I think given this younger population, they are going to be more of a moderating force. They are a generation that has been doing active shooter drills in schools since they were in kindergarten. They have very strong opinions about things like gun control. They have been born and raised in an environment where they always assumed that women would have the right to choose what to do with their bodies, and that is suddenly not a given anymore. They are also the previous generation basically came of age in the entirety of post 9/11. This generation has seen the end of that conflict, and they, well, not conflict necessarily, but they've seen the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They have not been as affected by by 9/11. So I think we're going to see a lot more moderating forces. We're going to see a lot more purple states happening. I do think that the Democrats really need to think long and hard and not see this as a endorsement of Biden necessarily, and not necessarily run Biden again in the next election. I think that would be a big mistake.
Right. Also, Ms. Bariza, you just mentioned about Florida. Now, there is a thing that has been going on, Ron versus Don. And of course, former President Donald Trump was not very happy about it. He actually lashed, and said few things. Could you please shed some light? Do you think in presidential 2024 elections, we're going to be seeing these two folks running for the candidate of the, for the presidency?
I think if former President Trump announces his candidacy this week, it will be simply because he wants to do it before Ron DeSantis or Governor Youngkin might do it, or any other contenders. He wants to get ahead of the race. And that would serve only him. It would not serve the party. It would not serve the election coming up in Ohio. I do think that a lot of Republicans will probably want Ron DeSantis or Governor Youngkin to run. They still have a lot of the same policy agendas, but they don't have the same kind of they don't have the baggage of election denial and all of the other things that President Trump has now. He's not the same candidate that he was 4 years ago, where he didn't seem as volatile for some reason to many of his supporters. So I think even though he will have a strong base, I think that given that Ron DeSantis performed so incredibly well in Florida, which I don't think people were expecting him to flip some districts that he actually did, he might be a really strong contender.
Right. Also, when we talk about Florida, once again, there is another factor, which is Hispanic community. In Florida, we have a lot of Hispanic folks because of obviously the Caribbean, the South America is not far from there, the Puerto Rico and the Cuba and all that. And also New York has a lot of Hispanic community as well. Would you be kind enough to shed some light how in the midterm elections, Hispanic communities, are they leaning towards Republicans or Democrats overall? I'm just an idea.
Overall, I think like any community, like the Pakistani American community, there's going to be people who vote one side or the other for various reasons. In Florida, because a lot of the people are from migrants from places like Cuba and Venezuela, they tend to vote more Republican. Some of them who are anti-abortion would also probably, because of the social issues, vote more Republican. But I don't think that you can make a sweeping statement. Like, for example, a lot of young voters are turning that way. More successful fields in medicine, for example, It used to be that psychiatrists used to vote more Democrat, and now as they have gotten more financially rewarded, they are leaning more Republican. So there are various factors that play into all of these communities. And New York is solidly blue, at least for now. I don't see that going in the presidential election. I don't see that going any other way in the near future.
Right. Now, Dr. Saab, also there is another development which is taking place in Indonesia right now, where President Joe Biden actually he held a meeting with the President Xi Jinping of China, and that was the first time in 3 years. And of course, their initial response, both of them were very positive, and they were actually agreeing to the fact that they should actually work together instead of getting into further conflicts. How do you see their after this summit, obviously, whichever is happening in the Indonesia right now, do you think something positive will come out afterwards?
Though the details are not as yet out,
right.
But one positive thing was that the meeting unexpectedly lasted for more than 3 hours.
Wow.
Which they did not expect. So, right. Which means, when two presidents talk for 3 hours, they must be discussing something very important. And Biden's position from the very beginning was, though he initially he did try to play a bit aggressive when he said that Biden's words were that America will compete vigorously against China, but then he added that, but that competition will not lead to any direct conflict.
Right.
So that is a positive point.
Right.
What that means that they will, of course, they have economic interests together also. Both economies are tied also, in terms of business and all.
Yep.
So they are not, economic, though there is a rivalry on the international stage, especially with relation to Taiwan, with relation to North Korea, Japan. So these factors are there. And then what America considers Chinese expansionism in South China Sea, that also plays an important role. But at least I think a positive thing about that these two top leaders sat together, because when they negotiation always leads to some solutions, So as they say, opposite of vice is violence. When you don't talk, you end up violating international law and fighting. So I think this meeting was positive. As more details, and one more positive outcome was that they agreed that Antony Blinken will soon visit China to further explore possibilities of improving their relationship. So which means that there is a silver lining, and America expected China also to issue a statement against Russia, that this Russia and Russian invasion of Ukraine. But China has been very careful in that. China has not openly condemned Russia, though China says that such conflicts should be resolved by negotiations. But what America wanted China to do, China didn't do. So, but positive step is that they sat together, and at least there is some step that they have taken.
Absolutely. Now, Ms. Bariza, Umar, when we talk about, lastly, I would like to ask you a couple of things real quick. First of all, please give us the concluding remarks of these elections. What do you think, what will be the outcome of these elections? Also, Georgia is the key state right now, even though, like you say that, we were talking about it earlier, that obviously Vice President of the United States will have the, the vote that can be used. But then once again, it's the knife edge competition there. If you could please kindly shed some light on that and some of your concluding remarks.
So as for Georgia, I think it doesn't matter as much as it would have if Arizona and Nevada had not gone to the Democrats. I do think that given how the midterm vote was cast over there, it is most likely that the Democrats will carry that state. And as for concluding remarks, I would say that Democrats really need to not see this as an endorsement of President Biden. It really needs to be recognized as more of an indictment of extremism on the right. And Republicans should take note that running President Trump in the next election will most likely not serve them well. So I think this non-red wave has really brought to the fore that Trumpism is not the direction that the majority of Americans want to go in. They are terrified of what more decisions could be taken by the Supreme Court. And they just are looking forward to something that is more toward the center, and it would do the Democrats well to think more center left and not go with President Biden.
Right, Ms. Bariza, Umar, greatly appreciate your time and thanks a lot for sharing your views regarding the midterm US elections which are underway in the United States. Now, folks, we'll move to our second segment where former Prime Minister and Chief of PTI Imran Khan had an interview. He gave an interview to the Financial Times, and once again, Dr. Saab, this interview was we have witnessed a major U-turn in this particular interview where former Prime Minister Imran Khan accused the United States of treating Pakistan as a slave. But now he has indicated the desire to work with Washington, even though he accused the United States and he held them responsible for ousted his government, you know, the previous regime we're talking about. Please shed some light on it.
Well, for that, I think we need to understand Imran Khan's personality and Trump's personality, so to say, because we are talking about America also. So, you know, we can draw so many parallels between these two leaders, former leaders, so to say. Both of them are essentially populist leaders. And populist leaders have a couple of characteristics or features in them. Number one, they project themselves as larger than life personalities. They throw promises, unrealistic promises, you know. They try to focus people's attention on one or two points. So that's what exactly Imran Khan did. So initially also when Imran Khan was in power and Trump was in power, you know, they tried to project as if they were buddies, but nothing concrete came out of it.
Right.
So when Imran Khan was dislodged from his post through a very constitutional method, that was vote of no confidence.
Right,
so there was nothing unconstitutional or illegal or unlawful about that. Through vote of confidence he was removed, but he needed an excuse to blame somebody. So Imran Khan blamed America. So what he did, he tried to play on sentiments of people, because in Pakistan, of course, there is a strong lobby which somehow does not like America, or they have some anti-American feelings. So he wanted, Imran Khan wanted to capitalize on those anti-American feelings, and that was very dangerous. You know, in international relations, you don't do this. If you do this, you are directly hitting your own country's interest. Pakistan's interest is in having good relationship with all the countries, be it China, Russia, America, any country. So why would a former prime minister hit at a country which has been Pakistan's friend for long? I mean, that is a different question, whether how far that friendship was beneficial. There are some agreements and disagreements, but still America has been doing so much. So I think that was a wrong shot fired by Imran Khan. And then after 6 months, he realized that it was doing more harm to him. He had done harm to the country, to Pakistan in international relations, because as I said, that his government deteriorated relationship with Arab countries, with China, with America. Now, more so with America, he tried to push those relations to that extent where they were, so to say, infixable, but irreparable. But now, somehow, luckily, the present team that is there in Foreign Office, they are trying to mend that. And this policy is characteristic of Imran Khan's U-turn policy. He has been taking U-turns on so many other fronts also. So what he is expecting now, he is expecting that probably throwing some reconciliatory remarks towards America, America will look at him positively, and probably he thinks that there will be some, help, because he wants to come back to power. So by issuing this statement, I think Imran Khan is trying to mend that damage that he has done himself.
Dr. would definitely talk about it. Now, folks, we're going to be talking about this interview of former Prime Minister Imran Khan with the Financial Times, but right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, folks. Now, Dr. Saab, we were talking about the former Prime Minister and Chief of PTI, Imran Khan's interview with Financial Times. Now, you mentioned a little while ago about the damages which has occurred in the previous regime or the previous government in the result of their foreign policies with various brotherly and friendly countries, and Pakistan has suffered a lot. We know one thing for sure, that incumbent government is making all-out efforts to repair or to restore the relations with so many countries. Could you please shed some light on the some of the damages which were occurred economically and bilaterally, how the relationships were affected?
Well, I think on all fronts it was damaging, because our closest friends were 3 or 4.
Right.
We have America, we have Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, we have China, we have European Union.
Right.
These are the countries where most of the trade is, and closest allies are these countries with Pakistan. And whenever we need something, these countries come to help. So talking about the damages that was done, first of all, with Arab countries in the previous regime, when they visited both former Prime Minister Imran Khan and former Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, they visited Saudi Arabia, and when they came back, I mean, without any preparation, they started, trying to develop another non-Arab kind of bloc in Malaysia or somewhere. They talked about a new TV channel, they talked about a new bank and various things. And of course, Arab countries didn't like it. So then there was, and then Shah Mahmood Qureshi issued a statement also saying that if Saudi Arabia doesn't help us in Kashmir, we have other options. This was his statement. And of course, Saudi Arabia didn't like it. So from then onwards, Pakistan's relations with Saudi Arabia were damaged, and he could not mend it. The previous government could not repair it. And present government has successfully managed to mend those relations.
Right.
Then talking about China, look at CPEC. Now the CPEC before 2018, it was going in full swing.
And one of the game changers.
It was a game changer. It was about to deliver goods. And as soon as the PTI government came to power, they put brakes on it. They started talking about various things, various issues, that this is not fair, and we need to renegotiate so many things. Now, of course, China held back. And then, of course, China remembers when Chinese president was about to visit Pakistan. At that time, the so-called in 2014, the dharna that Imran Khan was leading, because of that, Chinese president had to postpone his visit to Pakistan. And then when Imran Khan came to power, he again continued that, and he was unable, though he visited China a couple of times, but he was unable to normalize relationship. In fact, he damaged those relationships. So this was the second. First, Arab countries. Second, relationship with China. And thirdly, with America. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that he went to America, he met Trump, both of them were populist leaders, and they projected as if they were buddies. But in the end, right after Imran Khan's visit, India annexed Kashmir, and Trump did not say a word.
Right.
And so, these are the things. And then in the past 6 months also, repeatedly Imran Khan was targeting America. And of course, in international, and that was happening because the present Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, Hina Rabbani Kar, these are seasoned people, seasoned politicians.
Right.
Now, when you have a seasoned politician in saddle leading your country, this team knows how to carry themselves on international forums. Unfortunately, the previous government and the Prime Minister and the entire team somehow were unable to manage. I will go to the extent of saying that probably they did not even know the etiquette of diplomatic language.
Right.
What to say where, what kind of words you use. So, they kept saying inappropriate words, issuing inappropriate statements, and that were highly damaging.
Right. See? Now also, sir, when we talk about we know that Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, they are making all-out efforts. The country has just suffered one of its own kind devastated floods, right? And both of these gentlemen, Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, they are going all over the world. And you know, even if whether it's Samarkand, whether it's New York, when it's COP27, on the sidelines of these summits and conferences, they are actually asking everyone to help Pakistan in this natural calamity, in the result of the climate change. And also on the other hand, we have former Prime Minister Imran Khan and the chief of PTI, who's actually holding public gatherings. And this was right after the floods, and some places were still severely inundated when the public gatherings were taking place, if you remember. What kind of politics is this? Could you please shed some light? I mean, what we are doing here, I mean, instead of, turning around and say, you know what, it's time for stand up together and work for the people who have lost everything in the flood affected areas. Please shed some light.
This is, as you said, what kind of politics? This is not politics. I think this is just simply point scoring. They want to, Imran Khan and PTI, they want to score more and more points. And in that, they have forgotten what kind of misery, what kind of sufferings people are going through, as you rightly mentioned. And, 1/3 of our country was inundated. 33 to 35 million people affected. This was one of the highest numbers ever. So this was not flood, this was a super flood. And the damages, 30 to 40 billion dollar damages were done. So if that happens, that the whole country needs to work on war footing together. You forget your differences and then you work. So there are two things here in Imran Khan's politics here. Number one, he went on this telethon or marathon to collect donations, and then he claimed on telephone, then he claimed that hundreds of billions of rupees were collected and nobody knows where that money went, what is being done, whether they are actually delivering that money, or that money is also just like, in the past we see that the money came for charity purposes and it was used for PTI's own accounts. So this is one. And number two, if PTI, as Imran Khan claims that PTI is a big party and I have support, and of course he has some support. So, and then he had this so-called tiger force and all. So now where is that tiger force doing anything for the people?
Absolutely.
Now if you have that force of young people, those young people should be used to do something positive for the country rather than raising slogans and having a long march and blocking roads and damaging public property, burning tires and things like that. That's what you teach your young people. If you have young supporters, and of course he has millions of young supporters, if you have that much support, now that support should be directed for some positive causes, especially at this moment. And that's where Imran Khan and PTI failed, and they are failing. And that's why we see, their popularity is declining. People were sick and tired of this, dharna politics. So that's why in the long march, he was looking for some excuses to postpone that long march, and he got some excuse and he postponed that. But again, then once again he started that. So this, this shows that his politics is not politics. It is simple point scoring. Somehow he wants to come back to power by hook or by crook. And whether it is, sometimes he tries to get help from establishment. Now he is trying to get help from America by sending positive signals that somehow, you install me back to power. And I don't think that is going to happen, because people of Pakistan, I think, have seen through the ruse and seen through the tricks and false claims and false promises that he has been making. So I think that people of Pakistan are intelligent enough to make their decision, and that we have seen in the recent so-called long march, in which he was unable to gather even a few thousand people.
Right. Well, Dr. Naazir, Mahmood, we greatly appreciate your time, and thanks a lot for sharing your views regarding both of the things that we were discussing today. Now, folks, when we talk about US midterm elections, obviously the conclusion has not been made yet, because the results are still coming in. There are some states which are still underway in these elections. The process is still underway. When we talk about local politics, or our second segment was regarding PTI's chief interview to the Financial Times. Local politics is something that right now the primary focus should be on the bringing the life to normalcy for the flood-hit areas. And in this regard, all we have to do is to stand united. With this, we conclude today's program. Thanks a lot for being with us and watching us, and take care of yourself and each others.